Hi, and I'd just like to say a big warm welcome to Gene Monterastelli. And I saw your email the other day, Gene, about people getting your name wrong. And I did a reel earlier on yesterday for Gene Monterastelli, which I hope I'm saying correctly. It came up with Gene Monster Deli. And I thought, oh, that's an
Yes.
interesting one. You're
Yeah.
probably used to that, are you?
Yeah. Automatic translators certainly have a lot of struggle with it for sure.
Yeah. So, and I'm just going to turn off my phone. So listen, welcome to Jean, and welcome to everybody for coming here. And I really appreciate everybody coming. And so Jean is one of the best known EFT practitioners, and through his website, tappingqa.com, he offers well over 500 different tapping and EFT related resources. And then since 2009, his Tapping Q&A podcast, you were really ahead of the posse there, Gene, weren't you? You know, I mean, nobody's doing really podcasts then, but you've over 600 episodes about, so it's absolutely fantastic. And Gene's going to be talking about a couple of projects that he has going. One is Tapping4Peace, his website, which he's worked on with Brad Yates and other leading EFT practitioners, and talk about how we can become vibrational leaders, spreading peace, and how we show up in the world. It has a ripple effect. So welcome, Gene, and thank you so much for being with us this evening.
My absolute pleasure. I'm glad to do it.
Yeah. So, and how this conversation came up because I had done a Tapping4Peace tapping kind of online thing, because people are kind of feeling very helpless, hopeless, and all the rest.
Mhm.
And literally, then the next day, your thing came in Tapping4Peace, and I went, "Well, there's synchronicity." And I said, "I have to talk to Jean." So, can you tell me a little bit about how it came about, and just tell me a little bit about it, how it came about for you?
Yeah. And I think we'll kind of get into the way that we show up in the world when we make changes in the world in this conversation as well.
Yes.
One of the things that I realized very early on as a practitioner is every single relationship that we are in and every single context we are in is a co-creation.
Mm.
And when we change one part of the stew that is making that co-creation, it changes everything.
Mm.
Now, sometimes when we show up emotionally different, what it does is it creates space for someone else to show up emotionally different.
Yes.
You know, like if things are going wrong, because I'm not a person that overreacts, I might underreact, but when things are going wrong, I have been through enough things that I'm going to be fine. And when things are going wrong, all of a sudden, lots of people are standing near me just because I'm a person who is going to be calm inside of that. And people like, you know, as Mr. Rogers used to say here in the States, go find the helpers when something goes wrong. And so
Okay.
people are drawn to that particular thing. So
Yes.
sometimes when we show up in a way, we create space for other people to do that. Other times when we show up in a new way, the way people choose to engage is to disengage.
Yes.
And so recognizing the fact that we're constantly in concert with everything around us.
Yes.
And so, and a lot of this comes like when I'm teaching surrogate tapping, you know, lots of times I get emails that are saying, how do I tap so my spouse will stop doing insert whatever that particular thing is?
Yes.
And the place that we always have the largest amount of control is the way that we respond. And
Yes.
our emotional state is part of the ways that we respond.
Yes.
And my goal in all of my work is to create a proportionate, well-informed emotional response. So the goal is never to be emotionless. It's great that I'm afraid of tigers, but if I never left my apartment here in Brooklyn because there's one in the Bronx Zoo, that's disproportionate.
Yes.
But I want to make sure that fear is there, so I'm not going to the zoo and climbing into the tiger cage for a little cuddle. You know,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
emotions are good, they're useful, they're helpful inside of that.
Yeah.
And so, what does a proportionate, well informed emotional response look like in my context so that I'm showing up in such a way that I'm comfortable inside of my own skin, which makes it easier for the people around me to do the exact same thing? So, that was kind of the starting point. And so, 15 years ago, I tried a little project called Tapping4Peace, where it was just sending little things out, getting people to commit once a week to Tap4Peace. Because of a number of things, it went away. And so last October and November, as the world was getting scary again, at least in a public facing way, Brad Yates, our friend, reached out to me and he's just like, I was walking this morning and tapping, and I want to do something in the world and I'm supposed to reach out to you. I was like, great, let's jump on Zoom. Let's have a conversation. And so I just said, I actually have this URL. It would be really, really simple for us to do this thing. And Brad was like, great. And so basically what I did was I reached out to all of my professional tappy friends. And I said, hey, we want to create something that's really, really simple, that's low key, that's low commitment, where once a week, so we're not overrunning people's inbox, we're just going to send them an email. And in that email is going to be a connection to a resource that'll help people find peace. Most of them are tapping related, but not all of them are. And so I had a whole bunch of people send stuff in. So we just built a little website, my team and myself. And so whenever you opt in on that day, you'll get resource number one. Whenever you start, and every 7 days after that, you just get this gentle reminder. And the reminder email is, hey, do something small today internally for peace. Do something small today externally for peace. If you know someone you could invite to do this, invite someone to do this. And just making it really, really simple in that particular way, because it's so easy to be overwhelmed by the world. And I don't think that there's going to be any point in history where we're not overwhelmed by the world, because at the moment we're sharing the planet with 8 billion people who all have free will, who are fickle and are inconsistent. And many of them are operating out of really, really deep fear, which makes the world a scary place. And so the thought was, and again, for me, my goal as I navigate my day is to be comfortable inside of my own skin. And what I mean by that is I recognize I'm not perfect. I recognize what I'm capable of. I recognize what I'm not capable of, so that when something happens that goes wrong, that's outside of my control, that is a struggle, I know where I stand and I know who I am inside of that, which makes it easier for me to navigate all of that. And so for me, a sense of peace, a sense of grounding, a sense of being comfortable inside of my own skin. In a lot of ways, those are synonyms. And so that's the goal. So that when I show up in that way, and you'd use that vocabulary, vibrational leader, that's actually the vocabulary of my friend Rick Wilkes. That, recognizing that when we show up energetically, I mean, you know exactly what it's like to be in a coffee shop and all of a sudden two people are having an argument and everybody else, you can like just feel the energy and you're like cowering away from this toxicness. Well, I think the other is true as well. That people who are peaceful are really attractive. And I don't mean like in a sexy way, but like they're people we want to be around, because we then start to co-regulate an emotional experience. And so I recognize that if I am showing up in an emotionally grounded, peaceful, curious way, it gives the opportunity for the people around me to do that in a little easier way, because they might want to be calmer, but they're also afraid if I'm calm, something's going to go wrong. And someone shows up in their space who is calm, and it's like, oh, he's calm and it's safe for him. Maybe it's calm for me as well. And that's not a conscious thought, but subconsciously we're constantly scanning our environment to take our cues about how we're supposed to react. I can remember when I was in high school, it's a dumb joke, but me and a friend of mine would just look at the ceiling in the hallway just to see how many people would look up to see what we were looking at. Because we're taking our cues from the people around us. And so the exact same thing is true. Like we're trying to learn, I step into a new environment. Is this safe? Is this comfortable? Okay, they're safe. They're safe. They're safe. It must be safe. They're panic. They're panic. They're panic. I should probably panic. And so that's where it comes from. It's just this idea, how do we show up in the world in that way? And even if the people around me do not respond differently, I do. And so like it's always, for me, everything is inside out job. Before I do anything, the place that I start is how I'm showing up and who I am. Even as a practitioner, I have a routine at the beginning of the day before I work with clients where I'm making sure that I am taking anything that I'm carrying with me. And if I can't clear it, at least bundling it up and setting it aside so I can be in a space of safety. I was working with a client 2 weeks ago, and I had asked her a question as we were working through a process. I'm like, well, what do you notice? And she's like, oh, I notice these tears behind my eyes. I'm like, awesome. Ask the tears, what are they afraid of? And she thought for a moment and she said, no, there's not that they're afraid of something, but there is emotion because it felt like you meant it when you said, what do you notice there? And so because I was showing up going, hey, I'm really curious. I'm really listening. I want to know what your experience is from that. She had this huge emotional response, not from my answer, not from my advice, not from my tapping, but simply asking a question in a way that she perceived was open-hearted and I was present to her. And so like just recognizing like, and then it just becomes this cascading event. You know what it's like to, have a good night's sleep or a perfect cup of coffee in the morning or someone to compliment your new shoes when you're walking out the door, how that impacts everything that happens for the next number of hours.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so like, so that's it. Like one of the things I always say at the end of my podcast is I always say, if you know someone in your life who could appreciate this episode, pass it along to them. And the best part is, even if they don't listen to the podcast, the simple fact you have reached out and said, hey, I'm thinking of you today and I want something better for them, for you, it's going to make their day better. And it's
Yes.
always followed by, I know that sounds cheesy because it's cheesy and it's true.
Yes.
And so for me, like the sense of creating peace is in the simple, small ways that we can impact where we are, knowing that it creates vibrational. And the other thing is that like, when I am showing up in a peaceful state, which is raising the vibrational state and the emotional state of the people around me, when I'm not in a peaceful state, I have now helped to cultivate a place that is more peaceful for me. And so I am no longer rising their tides, it's vice versa.
Yes.
And so it gives us the ability and community to do that. So that's like where it all comes from and what we're thinking about when we're doing it.
Yeah. And it's interesting what you were saying about taking cues from people around, because now people are taking cues from their phones and the
That's right.
information on their phones. And it's really, it can sometimes feel like it's a bit of an assault. You say, oh my God, it just becomes quite overwhelming.
15 years ago, I would like, and it, boy, the quaint times of social media 15 years ago, but it felt so toxic back then that I actually at one point made what I called 100 posts of beauty. And I was not allowed to post anything on social media until I had posted 100 beautiful things. And they could be some chalk artwork or a sunset over New York City or whatever it was, but literally trying to be the antidote to that particular thing. When I got on Instagram, I literally said, 20 sculptors I should follow, 20 painters I should follow, 20 photographers I should follow, and like just went and found people who created beautiful things.
Yes.
So that when I'm engaging with my social media, I'm being really intentional about how do I feed myself with beauty so
Yes.
that like, again, I'm taking my cue from that. If my day starts with me scrolling a 5-minute notes, at this point in my life, it's beautiful things and like unexpected animal friends. When you got a bunch of tiger cubs crawling over the big Labrador that is at the race, like those are the things I watch.
Yeah.
Owls running around, like, but those are the things that feed me in that particular way. So I'm in a circumstance that I'm showing up differently in my life and to the people around me because I've started from a place of nourishment, of
Yes.
beauty, of curiosity, of peace. And like I keep like for me, the easiest way to find peace in the world is having the disposition of curiosity.
Yes.
Because when I'm coming from a
Yes.
place of curiosity, it's like, okay, this isn't working. Huh. I wonder how I can make it work. This isn't
Yes.
perfect. I wonder how I can make it better. This is unsafe. I wonder how I could make it safer. And that sense of curiosity takes me out of an antagonistic or a wrestling disposition with my relationship, my environment, my job, my whatever is going on in the world. Like literally the current incarnation of Tapping4Peace was Brad going, I wonder how we do something. I'm going to reach out to the person who I know does organization really, really well. And so that's the reason why he reached out to me, because he knows
Yeah.
I'm really good at herding people around and creating something that is accessible by many. And
Yes.
so it came from a question. Like
Yeah.
literally, Brad didn't have an answer. He had a question. And so he started seeking into his community, what are possible answers for this?
Yeah. Brilliant. I love that. And I love that practical thing about Instagram, that following beautiful things, because
Yeah,
that's what shows up in your feed. Because the more you click on the
that's right.
clickbait
Yeah,
bad news, the more it's going to show. But why don't you just click on the nice? Because then Instagram say, "Oh, we send you more of this." The algorithm will be tuned
that's
to
right.
that.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, the amount of time that, like, just again, the algorithm is going, oh, this is what he likes. Like, I'm now constantly served videos of British school kids eating American food for the very first time.
Okay.
You know, these things they've heard about and seen, and like watching them respond. You know, you click on 3 of them, you're now going to get all of them. Click on
Yeah.
beautiful things, you're going to get all the beautiful things.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. So maybe we get to do some tapping, Gene,
Yeah,
and just maybe and I just maybe have people maybe feeling a little bit helpless, like there's nothing that they could do,
yeah,
or whatever you think. And people, please feel free to put stuff into the chat box. We'll kind of keep an eye on that or whatever. But so if you'd like to go ahead, and then after that, maybe you tell me about and talk about the 24 hours of tapping.
absolutely. So one thing that's really important for me, and it's an idea that comes from Milton Erickson, the great hypnotist, um, is that all transformation starts from stating what is. And so for
Mm.
me, if you ever watch any of my tap along videos, you tap with me in my classes, or my clients will know this as well. Almost always, my tapping starts with, I recognize the fact. And so when we're stepping into a world that is uncertain and we feel overwhelmed, the place I'm going to start with is that. Like, we so desperately want to flee the thing that is uncomfortable, and we so quickly want to get to the solution, which is great. But for me, like, there's the issue, and then there's the emotion about the issue. And then
Mm.
there's the emotion about the emotion about the issue. You know, there is the state of the world that feels scary, that then feels overwhelmed, that then feels helpless, that then feels like I'm failing because I'm not doing enough. You know, if I have those 3 extra layers, getting to that core doesn't matter, because there is, there's this hard candy shell that's hiding the gooey center that is the issue. And I need to deal with that first. So as we just to share that, is to set the table to kind of talk about why and how we're going to tap on what we're going to do. So
Okay.
if you want to tap along, tap in the order that makes the most sense for you. If you want to mirror us, that's great. But like, here in the States in the 80s, there were these old ads that were the yellow pages that said, let your fingers do the walking. I'm very much a proponent of that in tapping. Just tap the places that make sense. And just repeat after me. I recognize the fact
I recognize the fact
the world is so big,
the world is so big,
and there are so many moving parts.
and there's so many moving parts,
And I'm sharing the planet
and I'm sharing the planet
with 8 billion people
with 8 billion people
who have free will,
who have free will,
who are inconsistent,
who are inconsistent,
and have emotions just like I do.
and have emotions just like I do.
And when people are acting
And when people are acting
out of really strong negative emotions,
out of really strong negative emotions,
it makes navigating the world hard.
it makes navigating the world really hard.
And it is easy
And it is easy
to notice and point out
to notice and point out
the things that aren't working,
the things that aren't working,
the things that are scary,
the things that are scary,
the things that are
the
dangerous.
things that are dangerous.
And I give myself permission
And I give myself permission
to know that I am allowed
to know that I'm allowed
to feel overwhelmed
to feel overwhelmed
by everything that's going on.
by everything that's going on.
Because that feeling of overwhelm
Because that feeling of overwhelm
is just that part of me
is just that part of me
that wants better,
that wants better,
but it doesn't know where to start.
but it doesn't know where to start.
And it doesn't feel capable.
And it doesn't feel capable.
And so I want the overwhelm to know
So I want the overwhelmed to know
it has been heard loud and clear.
it has been heard loud and clear.
And I give myself permission
And I give myself permission
to know that the overwhelm has done its job.
to know that the overwhelm has done its job.
And at some point in the future,
And at some point in the future,
if it needs to point out
if it needs to point out
that things are out of my control,
that things are out of my control,
it can do exactly that.
it can do exactly that.
But it's done its job today.
But it's done its job today.
And I recognize the fact
And I recognize the fact
it is impossible
it is impossible
for me to transform the entire world,
for me to transform the entire world,
but I can transform my world.
but I can transform my world.
I can transform my heart.
I can transform my heart.
I can transform the way I show up.
I can transform the way I show up.
And as I do that,
And as I do that,
I make it easier
I make it easier
for the people around me
for the people around me
to also choose
to also choose
to show up in new ways.
to show up in new ways.
And transformation
And transformation
for a global community
for a global community
is going to be the sum total
is going to be the sum total
of all of our work.
of all of our work.
And I give myself permission
And I give myself permission
to add my voice
to add my voice
and my energy
and my energy
to the choir of peacemakers,
to the choir of peacemakers,
knowing that
knowing that
my imperfect voice,
my imperfect voice,
my unskilled voice
my unskilled voice
is going to magically blend
is going to magically blend
to create amazing harmony
to create amazing harmony
of peace.
of peace.
And there are going to be days
And there are going to be days
where it's much harder than others.
where it's much harder than others.
And there are going to be other days
And there are going to be other days
that are going to be much easier than others.
that are going to be much easier than others.
And I give myself permission
And I give myself permission
to take each of these days
to take each of these days
one at a time,
one at a time,
knowing that if I take it day by day
knowing that if I take it day by day
and moment by moment,
and moment by moment,
even imperfectly,
even imperfectly,
because I will always be imperfect,
because I will always be imperfect,
I can be
I can be
a vibrational leader for peace.
a vibrational leader for peace.
It is safe for me to be a vibrational leader.
It is safe for me to be a vibrational leader.
I'm allowed to be a vibrational leader.
I'm allowed to be a vibrational leader.
I'm worthy of being a vibrational leader.
I am worthy of being a vibrational leader.
I deserve to be a vibrational leader.
I deserve to be a vibrational leader.
And I give myself permission to do exactly that.
And I give myself permission to do exactly that.
Even if I don't know
Even if I don't know
what that looks like right now.
what that looks like right now.
I give myself permission
I give myself permission
to be curious
to be curious
about how
about how
I can be a vibrational leader.
I can be a vibrational leader.
Nice deep breath.
Oh, that was lovely. That was really lovely, Jean. And, you know, it's so important. Like if we transform ourselves, we
Mhm.
transform the people around us. And, you know, that the more we can do that, the more we're just going to be spreading that, it's not the right word, but just spreading that wave of energy.
Yeah.
And, you know, shining our light is just so important. And we just need to keep shining the light, keep shining the light, keep
Yeah.
shining the light. Yeah.
And the other thing is, like, as we like, it is good for us to commit to that. And it's also good for us to be gentle with ourselves when we do that perfectly. You know, there is a subconscious imperative to be accepted, because 8,000 years ago, when we were in little tribes of 70 to 120 people, if you were pushed outside of the tribe, you died. And that's not like, I'm using the word, we literally died in the literal definition of the word literal, not the millennial definition of literal. Like we would literally die.
Yeah.
And so anytime we're in a circumstance where we feel like we are going against some sort of cultural norm, our subconscious mind wigs out, because it literally equates, I'm going to be judged, I'm going to be pushed outside the tribe, I'm going to die. And so when we are surrounded by people who are overwhelmed and scared and stretched thin, choosing a different emotional response to our environment, it's countercultural. And our
Yes.
subconscious mind fears being countercultural. Intellectually, it's really easy to speak of the virtues of counterculture and all of the amazing things that have happened through the history because of, what's the old quote, history is rarely made by well-behaving women, like it's this sense of like recognizing that change comes from that. And we can strive for that, but also to be
Mhm.
really gentle with ourselves because like like the tapping for peace thing that we'll talk about here for a moment, or the 24 hours of tapping we'll talk for in a moment, like that is such a pale comparison to the thing that I actually wanted to do. As
Okay.
great it is and as powerful as it is, like it really is so small, but it wasn't possible. And instead of creating a plan to change the world in a way that I found was outside of my stretch, I went and created something that was different, that was still useful inside of that. And so
Yes.
to be gentle with ourselves, as like it's easy to go, oh, I'm going to go be a peacemaker. And then we walk out of this lovely community of people who have gathered from all over Europe who share this idea together. Like, that's great until like I literally have friends of mine that before they go into a Walmart, they have a prayer circle as a family. And it's not as a joke, but it's like Saturday morning at an American Walmart. Boy, are you going to bump into humanity. And like recognizing that it's okay and it's appropriate for us to
Yeah. Yeah.
recognize that just because this is the ideal doesn't mean we're going to do it consistently and doesn't mean we're going to do it well. And it means that we're going to make half steps and we're going to be scared. And I don't want you to beat yourself up because you're not doing it perfectly.
Yes. Yeah.
Like there's this balance inside of, yes, I want to push forward and I need to recognize my humanity inside of all of that.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I love that, like being gentle with ourselves, because I think we're, especially in Catholic Ireland, it's it's all about beating yourself, and
Yeah, a friend of mine, whenever I am like being deprecating of myself, he'll literally say, Gene, you're not being very charitable with yourself. And
yeah,
boy, like that's a vocabulary that cuts to the quick, because
yes,
like I want to be a charitable person in the world. Like it's one thing to say, like, I don't want to pump my tires and like be egomaniacal, but like it's like you're being mean. But
yes,
putting it in that way, it's not like it wasn't scolding. It's like, I know this is what you aspire to in the way that you respond to the world. Because he's a good friend, I want you to respond to yourself in the exact same way.
yeah, yeah. That's beautiful. I love that. I love that. So I just want to ask if people want to put something in the chat box, how they're feeling after that round of tapping, any comments or whatever. And Jean, maybe you just tell us about this 24 hours of tapping and
Yeah.
just, yeah.
So where it came from was I'm a big football fan. Most of my UK geography is based off of stadiums.
Okay.
Um and it's the way that I navigate most of Europe at this point in my life. And so going into the last men's World Cup, which was hosted in Qatar, um, Qatar has some very interesting work policies. If you
Yes.
are a migrant worker and you come into Qatar, your boss gets your passport. So you can't leave the country without your boss's approval, because that's the only way you can get your passport back to go home.
Yeah.
Um, and so I had read an article about 2 years out from the tournament, which said that if there was a moment of 1 minute of silence for every migrant worker who had died in the building of the stadiums, because Qatar doesn't have world-class soccer stadiums, football stadiums, um, the first 32 games of the tournament would be played in silence.
Wow.
By the time the tournament started, including every single game, every single knockout game, every single minute of extra time, if 1 minute of silence would have been held for every worker who would have died, the entire tournament would have been played in silence.
Gosh.
And so for me, it's like, oh, how do I respond to that? So I wanted to do something around football. And again, it was just way too complicated. But in the process of that, I had been introduced to this really amazing organization that's called the Peaceful Heart Network. It's a Swedish NGO. It was started by a journalist who was covering East Africa. And she realized as she was covering East Africa and as she was doing interviews, which she was actually to report the news, to tell of the horrors that were going on with the civil wars and the warlords and all that was going on, she realized in doing her job, she was actually re-traumatizing the people that she was interviewing,
Right.
and wanted to respond to that in a different way. And so the Peaceful Heart Network was created as they met someone else, Carl Johnson, Dr. Carl Johnson, who's an American who's doing work in East Africa as well. And they came up with a version of tapping that is called TTT, Trauma Tapping Technique,
Yes,
which is a
yes.
wordless version of tapping, which allows you to do work in really, really amazing ways in group settings when you're dealing with really horrific stuff. And since partnering with them, I've actually gotten a chance to do work with them in Rwanda and Uganda with people fleeing the warlords in the Democratic Republic of Congo and genocide survivors and folks surviving the South Sudanese civil war. And so this is before they knew me very well. And so a couple of years ago, I said, I want to raise a bunch of money for you. I'm going to do a 24-hour live stream. And the reason why I chose to do a 24-hour live stream was a stunt. I knew people would show up to see because it was something that was weird. And this is our third year this year. The first year we did it, the marketing material literally was show up and see if Gene dies. Because I sat in this seat for 24 straight hours. And because I've been podcasting for 15 years, and because I like to organize stuff, I just reached out to all my tappy friends. And I said, I'm doing this really crazy thing. Do you want to come along with me? And either out of pity or appreciation or whatever, no one said no to us. Like everybody said yes. And so we did the silly 24-hour thing, and like all good fundraisers, basically, I interviewed someone about a topic, and then for 5 minutes I begged for money. And then I interviewed someone about a topic, and then I begged for money. And so in the first 2 years we've done it, we've raised about $75,000
Wow,
for them. We're in the north of Rwanda, and we're running this training for aid workers who are taking care of the people who are fleeing the Democratic Republic of Congo. And we're just doing it. And Ulf just turns to me and he goes, "Oh yeah, by the way, you paid for this." And it's this opportunity for, like, not everybody's going to have the opportunity or is going to feel safe and comfortable being in a place that has true refugees crisis. And, I pay attention to the news. There is a lot of conversation in Europe right now about refugees and what that looks like, and finding ways that we can respond. And so we do it a couple of ways. One is because we're trying to showcase the work of the Peaceful Heart Network. Two is we're trying to get people financially invested in supporting the work that they do. And three is we're saying, hey, in a school near you, in a homeless shelter near you, in a crisis pregnancy center near you, there is someone who you can sit with as a helper and teach them a simple tool that will make their life better. One of the Rwandese women was just giving her testimony, and she said, I can now sleep when it rains. That's significant because the genocide 30 years ago happened during the rainy season.
Wow.
And so neighbor killing neighbor was associated with the rain. And she had never, for 25 years, she could not sleep when it rained, of course, because we know the way that the body responds. And so on July 12th, starting at 3 p.m. Eastern time, which I believe is, quick math, 8 p.m. for y'all.
8 p.m. Us, yeah.
And we're going to be on for 24 hours. All of it's recording. No one is expected to show up live. Some of the recordings had to be done pre-record because of it. At approximately 11:30 Eastern time, so 4:30 your time on Saturday the 13th, we have an hour conversation from inside of a county jail here in the United States. A number of years ago, the 10th inmate who had been released from this jail had died of a drug overdose, and the sheriff who was in charge of it, and I have seen his Facebook page. This particular sheriff and I probably do not agree on a lot of things politically in the world, but he decided that this couldn't happen again. And he literally walked around his facility. He said, "Who wants real recovery?" And he just said, "I'm willing to try anything." And there was a woman who had a son die in a drug overdose named Carrie Rhodes, who had learned this tapping thing. And so he invited her just to come in and tell her story. And he went, "You're hired." She didn't know there was a job. And she connected with the Peaceful Heart Network. And so we have an hour conversation. Last year we talked to the men. This year we talked to the women, and they lead us in tapping. They share specifically how their lives have changed because of this. And it's not that we all have to go into jails to do this sort of work. I was lucky enough to do that work for numbers of years, but it was a demonstration of giving someone a simple tool. And
Yes.
how, like, one of the women actually says, "For the first time in my life, I knew what it was like to have and be a friend. Every relationship I'd ever had in my life was transactional, either for safety or to give me value." And that was unlocked because the Peaceful Heart Network made a wordless tapping tool available to them.
Mm.
And so at this point in my life, my sister who works with me full time, who you've been working with to set all
Yes.
of this up,
Yeah.
1/3 of her time is dedicated to us supporting the Peaceful Heart Network and doing the work that they're doing, just because it just, yeah, I mean, and I'm sure you've heard, as we've been talking, the emotion coming in and out of my voice as we do this. I mean, one of the things that we talked about when we were in Africa was the sense that over and over and over again, hashtag tear tally, because we were like counting the number of tears as we worked our way through all of this stuff. And like, so yeah, so that's what it is. It is an opportunity for you to gather with. We had about 8,000 people participate at one point or another over the 24 hours last year. It's an
Fabulous.
opportunity for all of us to gather with a global community. And the best part is, like, some of the most skilled tapping practitioners in the world are giving their time not for an affiliate commission, not to build their email list, for nothing. Like, our speakers get nothing out of it at all. And like a summit, like, there's all of those transactional things, and I do those as well. That's great. But literally, it's the tapping community stepping up and saying, how do we show up in the world, making a difference as peacemakers? And so it's a celebration and an opportunity for us to do that.
That sounds amazing, Jean. And Katie has put the link there in the chat. If people want to copy and paste that they can sign, they can opt into that and sign up for that. But that sounds amazing.
Yeah, and if you opt in and you can't join us live for any of it, one of the things that we do, again, absolutely free, is we make every single interview available after the fact. And so basically what happens is, after this long 24-hour chunk, we have to turn it into videos, but basically starting the Monday after it, we publish 4 or 5 of them a day, and we're talking about every issue under the sun. It's some of the greatest minds in the world just sharing stuff that they're really passionate about.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I love the sound of that. So yeah, so the link is there in the chat if people want to copy and paste that. So maybe we kind of maybe do another round of tapping, Jean,
Yeah.
and I'm just wondering if we do something maybe positive, you know what I mean, about just bringing out you know, how the difference that we can make, maybe something
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tip top of the head, move from point to point. I recognize the fact
I recognize the fact
that there is a part of me
that there's a part of me
that deeply
that deeply
and profoundly
and profoundly
wants to be
wants to be
an agent of peace.
an agent of peace.
And I recognize
And I recognize
being an agent of peace
being an agent of peace
is a countercultural notion.
is a countercultural notion.
But at the exact same time,
But at the exact same time,
just because it feels countercultural
just because it feels countercultural
doesn't mean that I am alone.
doesn't mean that I'm alone.
My desire
My desire
to be a peacemaker in the world
to be a peacemaker in the world
is not a unique desire.
is not a unique desire.
It's a unique flavor,
It's a unique flavor,
but I am not alone.
but I am not alone.
And I give myself permission
And I give myself permission
to recognize I do make a difference,
to recognize that I do make a difference,
even in really small ways.
even in really small ways.
And I give myself permission
And I give myself permission
to be easy and gentle with myself,
to be easy and gentle with myself,
knowing that
knowing that
I don't have to be perfect.
I don't have to be perfect.
I don't have to do it exactly right.
I don't have to do it exactly right.
Instead,
Instead,
showing up
showing up
as an agent of peace,
as an agent of peace,
even in the most imperfect way,
even in the most imperfect way,
is going to be an invitation
is going to be an invitation
for someone else to do the same.
for someone else to do the same.
And when I show up
And when I show up
as an imperfect agent of peace,
as an imperfect agent of peace,
I make it safer for someone else to do the same.
I make it safer for someone else to do the same.
And so I give myself permission
So I give myself permission
to know that
to know that
I'm allowed to stretch a little bit today
I'm allowed to stretch a little bit today
in how I show up
in how I show up
in my world
in my world
as an agent of peace.
as an agent of peace.
Nice deep breath.
And that's lovely. And I love that, like I give myself permission and, I can make a difference kind of showing up as an agent of peace. It's just such strong words, Gene.
My single favorite tapping phrase without question is I give myself permission.
I love that.
I mean, like, because like the framework I work from, just kind of from the inside out, is if I'm not doing something, the first question I ask, is it not safe? The second question, am I not allowed? The third question, am I worthy? Worthy, and then finally, am I deserving of doing those things? And that allowed piece is so important because, again, we go back to this very primitive nature of wanting to belong. And so giving myself permission to go against the grain, I'm saying I'm allowed to do that.
Yeah.
I remember the power of being 13 years old, walking the hallway of my middle school, knowing that I couldn't get in trouble because I had permission, because I had a hall pass. And it was my shield against any adult who was going to say, you're in the wrong place. It's like, oh, no, I'm not. I have permission to do that. I regularly handwrite permission slips for my clients to do the things that they want to do in their life.
Oh, I love that. I might nick that.
Do
I
it.
steal that.
Do it. Please do. But that's how important permission is.
Yes.
Like when we're on the edge of doing something, simply saying, I'm allowed to do this.
Yeah.
All of a sudden makes it easier. Not necessarily easy, but it makes it easier for us in anything that we're doing. I give myself permission to believe in myself. I give myself permission to try hard. I give myself permission to fail and fail spectacularly. Like just giving myself permission to do those things, because ultimately, my entire professional life is built around helping people to live authentic lives that they love. And for those of us gathered here, part of that is being an agent of change and a peacemaker in the world.
Yeah.
And so giving ourselves permission to do exactly that just is so valuable.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I just see one comment actually from earlier. So Mary says, I love the way you dealt with overwhelm, acknowledging and accepting it. Can see how beneficial this approach is. Also states that it has done its job for today. And that's lovely. Yeah, thank you.
And so dispositionally, like this is where that comes from. Our issues are our allies.
Yeah.
Every issue we have is trying to take care of us in some way.
Yes.
Like our buddy Brad Yates says, is resistance is just misguided self-love.
Yes.
And so everything I do is I acknowledge what the emotion is trying to convey. Yes. Overwhelm, I don't have enough time. Sadness, disconnection from what's important. Frustration, I'm not getting the thing that I want. Fear, there is danger. And so by starting there, again, stating what is makes it so much, so I'm not wrestling with my emotions. I'm going, thank you. If you need to come back, you can. You did your job.
Yeah. And I think just honoring them and giving them a little bit of kind space.
Absolutely.
Just to be seen, just to be heard. Yeah.
Our emotions are nothing more than a 5-year-old in the back seat going, hey. Yes, windmill. yes, there's a windmill. And then the child settles down again.
Yeah.
That's all the emotion's trying to do, is just trying to get our attention and point something out.
Yeah.
And when we say what the emotion's trying to point out, the emotion goes, oh, okay, I've been heard. I don't have to keep screaming.
Yeah. Brilliant, brilliant. I love that. I love that, Gene. Gene, so it'd lovely if anybody has any kind of comments or anything they want to put in the chat box. It'd be lovely to hear them. Could we finish off with one? Let me just see, what would we finish off with, Gene? Maybe just giving thanks for everybody showing up here today, knowing that even by us doing this, we have made a difference. And just, and let's just see how we go. Yeah.
I recognize the facts.
I recognize the facts.
The first step.
The first step.
In creating change.
In creating change.
Is acknowledging the fact.
Is acknowledging the fact.
That I would like to create change.
That I would like to create change.
And by showing up today.
And by showing up today.
I have demonstrated to.
I have demonstrated to.
Everybody else who has shown up.
Everybody else who has shown up.
That I am not alone.
That I am not alone.
In my desire.
In my desire.
To create peace in the world.
To create peace in the world.
And even if.
And even if.
I do not have.
I do not have.
People I spend time with.
People I spend time with.
In a regular way.
In a regular way.
Who want to be agents of peace.
Who want to be agents of peace.
I recognize the facts.
I recognize the facts.
There are legions of people.
There are legions of people.
Who want peace as much as I do.
Who want peace as much as I do.
And so I give myself permission.
So I give myself permission.
To acknowledge and recognize.
To acknowledge and recognize.
I am not alone.
I am not alone.
And.
As
I move forward.
As I move forward.
I give myself permission.
I give myself permission.
To be imperfect.
To be imperfect.
To be inconsistent.
To be inconsistent.
To be lost.
To be lost.
As I try and be an agent of peace.
As I try and be an agent of peace.
Because it will become.
Because it will become.
Even in my imperfect effort.
Even in my imperfect effort.
A habit and disposition.
A habit and disposition.
And the time that I've spent today.
And the time that I've spent today.
Has already started to nurture.
Has already started to nurture.
And reactivate.
And reactivate.
That part of me.
That part of me.
That longs to be an agent of peace.
That longs to be an agent of peace.
Nice deep breath.
I love that. Thank you, Gene. I just see there's a quote, somebody, what you're talking about reminds me of this quote from Michael Bernard Beckwith. Behind every problem, there's a question trying to ask itself. Behind every question, there's an answer trying to reveal itself. Behind every answer, there's an action trying to take place. And behind every action, there's a way of life trying to be born. Well, that is so beautiful. Thank you so much. That is gorgeous. Yeah. So, Gene, thank you so much for being here this evening. It was just a pleasure and an honor to have you here. And this is going to be recorded, so I'll send out the recording, and we'll also include the sign up for the Tapping for Peace and also the 24-hour tapping. So thank you so much, and I really appreciate it. And thank you so much to everybody who showed here today and for being agents of peace. So thank you.
And have a great day, y'all. Thanks for hanging out.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Gene. Oh, that's some lovely comments here. Yeah. Really great to chat with you.
Hey, I'm a very simple man. Tell me I'm useful and compliment my shoes and I'm yours. Like one of those two things, like it's just that simple.
Yeah. No, that was great. That's lovely. And as I think people just feel, can I make a difference? So it's just lovely. It's wonderful to have that.
Yeah.
And as I think Tracy was saying, that your energy is supercharged. So it's lovely to have that supercharged energy. I love the American energy. The American energy is always kind of really positive and strong. So it's great. Very exciting. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity. If there's anything else I can do for you, you know how to track me down.
Brilliant. Okay, lovely. Thanks, Gene. Okay, we shall be in touch.